But what's happening is people are sending black and white images to the printer without the colour profile. So when it comes back, they have like a blue hue on them. A blue hue, and you probably can't tell on these two pictures here through the camera. But I just hold them up there. One of those was colour corrected properly. One of those wasn't. And in the cold light of day, one looks a little bluer, one looks proper black and white, how it should. And I'll show you on screen. You can probably see a little bit better if I do it like that. I'll show you on screen, a more exaggerated example. But that's what happens to black and whites, and it's a sure sign that people don't know or have missed that step of making sure the profile is right for the paper. And to be fair as well, sometimes cheap crap paper and cheap crap printers, no matter what you do, you're going to get a blue tone coming back. A good way to check it is to not look in artificial light like fluorescent or tungstens, because they'll not give you the correct colour. Go outside into daylight and hold it in daylight. And if you've got an horrible cast on your picture, chances are you've used crap paper or not had a colour profile installed. Alright, I'm going to make a quick cup of tea, and I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about black and whites. Alright, so let's do a black and white. So I'm going to stay on this picture of Jess because it's probably a good one to demonstrate black and white, but I'm just going to hold it there a little sec. I'm just going to talk about colour. So people conceive colour as being, so people conceive black and white as being something without colour, and quite often the thing they do to get rid of the colour is just desaturate everything. So if we look on my screen and I just open the hue and saturation things and just drag off the saturation, you can go, oh, look at that, lovely black and white, bang, save, print, done. Well, not quite, because when you desaturate something, you got to remember the colour is where the detail lives, particularly on something like a person. So let's say Jess has got nice coloured cheeks, she's got nice coloured neck, hands and breasts, everything's nice and coloured. So if we take the colour off, what are we doing? We're taking away that colour detail. But the information of the detail is in the colour. The tone and shapes on her face are defined by that colour. So if you take them off like that, you can see that definition disappears. Is that what we want to do? Or do we want to leave that definition there and simply mask it, simply hide it, so we can no longer see the colour? Well, I'd say yes, that's exactly what we want to do. Why would you go to all that trouble of shooting, colour balance, white balance, edit, colour balance, white balance, check, to get to a perfect picture like this, to then whip all the colour off and all the skin, lips, eyes, hair, outfit colour off with it? We want that detail to be there, we just don't want to see it in colour. So how can we do that? How do we do that without ruining what we've got there? Well, the best way to do that is it's simple really. We're just going to mask the colour. The colour will still be there, we're just going to mask it. So how do we do that, Lance, you say? Well, if we go down to the little adjustment layers button here and click on that, click on solid colour. Now, the important thing here is you don't use any colour. We just want to use anything that's on the grayscale. So white down to black. Any of those neutral colours will do. Click OK, and then where you've got a blend mode here that says normal, we're going to change that to colour. Bang, mono. And the good thing about that is all that colour detail that we were taking out before is all still there. It's just masked. That little curve we've got there is still there. It's just masked with that. And that's the only process I ever use for making black and whites. And we'll have a look at another one just to show you that it works for things as well as people. I use this as an example on for another tutorial, this same picture. But here we are, guy crossing the street, nice and contrasty. Let's say I want to make a black and white from this. I don't want to desaturate it and take all, I will lose all the detail. His wheels are coloured, all this kind of like tarmac detail will go if I desaturate that. So all I'm going to do in the first instance is solid colour, make sure I've got a neutral colour, change the blending mode to colour, he says, like that. Nice base for to start for black and white. Yeah, actually quite nice that. Now I like a load of contrast on my black and white, so what I do from here is I put a load of contrast on, but I don't do it using things like curves or exposure or any of those other things that you don't have any scope for fixing, adjusting. I do it using a luminosity mask and some curves. I'll show you the process, it's quite simple. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the RGB over in the channels here. I'm going to load the RGB into the picture and use it as a mask. So I'm going to press Control. You see that little hand appears next to the cursor. I'm going to click on RGB and you see how it's loaded that. So when I use my curves now, all it's going to do, because I've loaded that luminosity masking, the luminosity is like the outline, the fabric of the picture. When I do this action now, it's only going to affect the highlights, not the shadows. So I'm going to boost the highlights 30%. Can you see that? So I'm holding down Shift and arrow down. 1, 2, 3. You can see there's only the highlights moving. I'm going to go back 10, so it's 20%. So it's right on the edge of exposure. The sky's gone a little bit there, not worried about that, but these areas are right on the edge of exposure. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to press Control and J to make a copy of that, then Control and I to invert it. So now all I'm doing with the inversion is making a negative of that. So I'm going to click in there and put that back to 0. And this time, because I've inverted that selection, instead of it moving the highlights, it will just move the shadows and midtones. So I'm just going to put 5% on that because that's loads. So if I switch that on and off now, look, can you see that on the screen? That's quite a dramatic shift in shadows, and that's quite a dramatic shift in highlights. And the good thing about doing it this way is I can switch them all off, or I can feather them even more. I can either click back in and move that up and down, 12 more or less, or I can just click on the opacity for each layer and fine tune it down. Again, whilst I'm watching what my histogram's doing, because obviously if you go too far, the histogram will tell you you've gone too far. Yeah, you see all that shift over to the right hand side. So again, I'm not really watching what the screen's doing. I'm instinctively watching what my histogram's doing. 10, 20%. In fact, I'm going to go for 15% on that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like that. Nice black and white. If I was being really finicky, what I might do is I might go into the sky here, click into the mask area on the highlights, use my paintbrush, and I might just brushing back some of that detail back in where it's been lost a little bit, but not much. That's pretty much all I do. So that's what I would do for my black and white. And then what I make sure I'm doing is I'm prepping it for print by doing the edit, convert to profile, selecting the right color profile for the print paper I'm using, OK it, send it to the printer like that. Then hopefully it will come back as a black and white, like this one of my beautiful wife Kirsty, and not like the one I showed you before of the great Paddy, because that one, where did I put it? That one is completely blue. You can see that. It's pretty obvious it's shady blue, and that's because it was purposely not calibrated on some crappy paper just for a demonstration. And I'll show you kind of what will happen if you don't quite get the colour right, and it will look something like this. It says, instead of my colour being completely black and white like that, you will end up with something like more like that when your print comes back. Maybe a bit less dramatic, maybe more like that, where it's black and white, but it's got a little bit of mist colour in it. And I've over exaggerated that so you can see it. But without the right colour profile for the right paper, you're going to get something like that. So it's imperative that when you do this, you make sure that you do your colour profile. This one's already got the colour profile in it, or has it? No, it hasn't. So I'll show you again how to do the colour profile. Edit, convert to profile, click the Yes Colour Lab Pro Illustra, OK. Now you can see on this one it's added a little bit of blue in here. Don't worry about that. It's telling me that it needs to add that in for the paper I've selected, so when it comes out at the print stage. It may be that the paper they use has a little bit of a red hue to it, so that little bit of blue make sure it's neutral. And that, all my good ones are from DS, so don't worry about that. The colour profile is imperative. Alright. And that's it for printing black and white and making a black and white. They are pretty simple processes, and again, they're the ones that I use regularly. I use them all the time. I know I repeat myself a lot, but that's what I do. It's repetition to get yourself to a point where you know exactly what you're doing. And whether you're cropping, resizing, getting things ready for print, make sure you follow steps. Mine worked for me. I was taught them a long time ago, and I've used them. I've not deviated from those in probably 16 years, because they work. Tried, tested. Why fix it if it's not broken? Is the saying, isn't it?